One of the greatest topics that I feel pretty strongly about when it comes to teaching and learning is that of teacher leadership and how we as educators, just like with our students, we possess a lot of power as far as creating change and looking at different ways to motivate our students, but also motivate our colleagues as well. I often think about, as I reflect upon my experience as an educator, all of the great ideas that my colleagues were able to teach me, all of the things from collaboration, and how important that has been throughout my journey in education. So, we're going to look very briefly at teacher leadership and being the change when it comes to your classroom, but also in the schools that you serve and in the communities that you serve as well. So, looking at a couple of outcomes for our session, we're going to identify your teacher identity through a self-reflection activity. We'll also look at how to become a reflective practitioner. I once had a professor in college at ECU that said the best teachers are the ones that reflect, that are what they call a reflective practitioner. So, how does that look in practice? What does that actually mean? So, under the purpose of self-reflection, how does that impact your effectiveness as a classroom educator? And how does that affect your relationship with colleagues as well as your working relations and effectiveness within your school settings as well? One of my favorite teacher quotes out there is, "To teach is to touch lives forever." Right now, you're planting seeds, and we don't always see the fruit. We don't always see the fruits from our labors or the crops as far as what we planted. But knowing that each and every day we have given back to students within our classrooms, we've given them our best selves as teachers, there is nothing more rewarding than our profession, because without our profession, none other professions are possible. So the relationships that you build, knowing that you've given students what they've needed in order to be successful, we touch lives forever, and that is truly something that's worthwhile. One of the big questions that I always ask teachers is, why teach? What led you to the profession? Why do you get up every day and do what you do? For me, I think about my own children and how I want the best teachers for them. Every child deserves a great teacher. I know nowadays with so much technology and so many things, it can be quite overwhelming as far as navigating through that as a classroom educator. But I once heard another colleague tell me, "Josh, educators or students rather, they don't need great stuff. They just need great teachers." So I feel like even in the midst of all the technology, what are you doing as a teacher? What is the human to human interaction like within your classroom? And that's something to reflect upon as well. Are students just sitting in front of laptops or computers all day? Are you delivering direct instruction? All of this goes back to the differentiation conversation that we've had in the past. So think about that as you become a self-reflective practitioner on your own practices. So what does it mean to be a teacher leader? How does one become a teacher leader? What are ways in which even beginning teachers can take leadership? One great myth is that, "Well, Josh, I've only been teaching 1, 2, or 3 years. I'm fairly new to the profession. How can I be a leader within my school?" The biggest thing here is to think about how are you leading inside your classroom? That's a big question to consider when thinking about teacher leadership. We all know, especially in any educational setting, we have to do so much more with less. So what are we doing as far as encouraging our students, building those relationships, not only with students but also our colleagues as well? A couple of attributes to think about when we talk about teacher leadership is, how are you thinking outside your classroom? How are you making lessons? How are you making hands-on activities? How are you making all of that meaningful to your students? No matter what it is you're teaching, whether you're a math teacher, whether you're a science teacher, a PE teacher, whatever, how are you thinking outside your own classroom? What kind of risks are you taking inside your classroom? Going back again to lesson planning, differentiation. Are students doing worksheets all day? How are you taking your activities and making the instruction relevant to your students' needs? How are you making it so that all kinds of learners are being effective in your classroom? Teachers who aren't afraid of saying they don't know something. For so long, I think as educators, we felt like we've had to be the sage on the stage. We've had to know all the answers to all of the questions that our students ask. And those of you that have taught, you know what I mean as far as these students, they'll ask you all kinds of things and it can catch you off guard. But it's okay to say, I don't know. Not just to students, but also to colleagues. Hey, I really don't know the answer to that, but I'll get back to you. You know what? I'm not sure about that. Why don't we research and find out? It's okay to say you don't know something. And then on the reverse, teachers who aren't afraid of sharing what they do know. Oftentimes I see where beginning teachers or new teachers can be quite intimidated by maybe the veteran educators that are their colleagues within their departments or their schools. I always say, do not stifle your own voice. Share what you know, because chances are you've got a great activity or you've got a great concept that you know works. Don't hide that under a bush, right? Share that. Don't be afraid to speak out and share, whether you have faculty meetings, department meetings, or what we call PLCs, professional learning communities. There are all kinds of avenues for you to be able to share what worked for you and maybe even what didn't. But overall, don't be afraid to share what you do know and what you know works. There's a couple of links embedded within this presentation, but one thing that I want you guys to understand in all of this is that you matter. You are the one facilitating the learning, driving the student's education within your classroom each and every day. There's a ton of great TED Talks out there for teachers. I encourage you guys to take a moment to look those up. I know we viewed one from Rita Pearson earlier in the course, but I want you guys to think about what does that look like as far as being a champion for students. How are you championing for your students in your classrooms each and every day? But this quote comes from Sir Ken Robinson, and he's got a TED Talk here. It says, the role of a creative leader is not to have all of the ideas, is to create a culture where everyone can have ideas and feel valued. Think about it. We as humans, we yearn for that feeling of acceptance, that feeling of being valued, that what we have to say matters. So in thinking about creativity, it's okay to get ideas from others. It's okay to share what you know. All of that is perfectly acceptable. So don't be afraid to do that. How are you leading the learning within your classroom? I've got a couple of bullet points here that we'll just go over. The first one is collaborate. How are you working with others inside your school setting? I recognize that many of us may be the only teacher for that particular subject or that particular grade level. There are a ton of online communities and other professional organizations out there. I encourage you guys to look into these. With technology and resources, there are more opportunities out there than ever. So don't be afraid to take the collaboration, take risks to collaborate with colleagues that may not even be within your own building. Moving into that second bullet point organically here is just the taking the risks, trying something, If it doesn't work, that's okay. Go back to the drawing board, tweak. Don't be afraid to what I call to do fail forward, right? As long as we're moving and pushing ahead, that's really all that matters. If something doesn't work, don't be upset, don't get defeated, fail forward. What worked, what didn't. This whole concept of failing forward goes right back to being a reflective practitioner within your school and within your classroom. It's not about looking smart, it's about getting smarter. We are lifelong learners as educators, and that is so important. We are consumers of information because we want to make sure that we are the best for our students each and every day. And we can't do that if we're just going to the filing cabinet and pulling out the same lesson plans day in and day out. What are we doing to stay on top of our craft? What are we doing to further ourselves, to grow professionally as educators? I really like this next one, be an idea bandit. We beg, borrow, and steal to a degree in public or in education overall. So that's one of the biggest things that we do, and that's okay. If somebody has an idea, it's okay to utilize that. If it works for them, tweak it, make it your own. Because at the end of the day, just like we tell our students, we're responsible for our own learning. Seeking out additional opportunities to help us grow is what we encourage our students to do. So why would we expect anything less from ourselves? Make time. I know it can be really difficult when you're teaching all day and lesson planning and all of the other requirements and duties that you might have within your classroom settings, but be sure to make time. Carve out intentional time for yourself, and also have a time and a place for when you plan. Keeping a calendar, whether it be through Google. I love my Google Calendar. It keeps me on schedule and on track a lot. Other than that, I'm a list maker, so being able to cross things off a list really gives me that feeling of self-gratification that I need to keep on moving. Stop worrying about what you don't have. And this goes back to what I said earlier as far as students don't need great stuff, they need great teachers. Look at what you have within your confines of your classroom and work with it. If there's things that you need that maybe your school isn't able to get you, think about the opportunity to write grants or have someone help adopt classrooms through these different sites that are out there now, as far as looking at matching teachers for certain projects they're working on. There's a lot of opportunities out there, so check within your own respective schools to see what is available. Barriers are gifts. Sometimes barriers hold us back, but look at barriers as opportunities to learn. Teach because it is your passion. Learn, grow, and stretch yourself because that is your job. No excuses and no regrets. Again, all of this relates back to self-reflection and how to become a better teacher. I have one of my favorite quotes here on this slide. It said, "Come to a frightening conclusion that I'm the decisive element in the classroom. It's my personal approach that creates the climate. It's my daily mood that makes the weather. As a teacher, I possess a tremendous power to make a child's life miserable or joyous. I can be a tool of torture or an instrument of inspiration. I can humiliate or heal. In all situations, it is my response that decides whether a crisis will be escalated or de-escalated, and a child humanized or dehumanized." So very powerful there. So, looking at your teacher identity, how do we become that? I've got just a quick activity you're able to walk yourselves through. It's called an above or below timeline activity. Think about your school year so far. Think about your students, your colleagues. Above the line, you're going to write the positive experiences that you've encountered so far, and then below, maybe some negative experiences that you've had so far. You can reflect on how this would look inside your classroom as well. The last activity involves a pyramid here, but we're running a little bit out.